Last week I mentioned this idea about everyone having secrets they don't want out there in the world. From that perspective, it made sense that even our murder victim Erin might have them, which in episode 4 we found out she did, and it all kind of really shines the spotlight on there being a connection between what happened to her and Katie Bailey when that was looking pretty thin based on their lifestyles. Perhaps we haven't yet scratched the surface of what that connection means for what's really going on in Easttown. Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'll be breaking down Mare of Easttown episode 4, or I guess when you're really feeling pissed, Mare of Easttown. This video will contain spoilers if you haven't watched the episode yet. This is your chance to leave. Also, before we dive in, over the past couple of episodes, the show's been putting out pretty revealing trailers for the upcoming episode. So this week what I'm going to do is, I've been wanting to do some theory videos anyway, so I'll follow this recap up with the second video talking about the trailer and ideas about what's going on in the series overall. With that out of the way, let's get into it because there's a lot we have to cover. So we start off with Mare in bed. She's still reeling from being suspended. She hasn't told everyone yet. And there's this great shot where she gets up out of bed, sort of walks around in a circle and doesn't know what to do with herself. She goes to talk things over with Lori. News is already spreading around town that she isn't working anymore. And it's worth mentioning that she has a really solid friend here that knows her, accepts her as she is, and supports her when she's down. Their connection feels crucial, and I would guess that Mare will rely on this and need this before all is said and done. Lori tells her that it's probably a good idea to step away from things. She's pretty much saying this knowing that her friend won't do it, but she still has to suggest it, and at least she learns that Mare will be going to therapy and can support her in that. At the police station, Colin shows up bearing Wawa coffee and learns that Mare's been taken off the case. We meet this new detective Hauser who's going to take her place. He kind of seems like a jerk. And we learn that the DNA results came back and neither Dylan or Frank are DJ's father. At the hospital, we find out that Dylan knows this. He's upset that his parents are still caring for DJ. And even though he's been a pretty awful character, later when we see DJ screaming in the middle of the night and they sort of have this fake out where he walks over with the pillow and you think for a second he might actually smother the child. Instead he picks him up, which is somewhat reassuring since DJ's situation is in limbo. With Erin dead and her father in jail, someone's going to have to take care of him. The other big reveal is that Dawn is actually taking care of Katie's daughter Kenzie. This is the first we've seen of that. And she does get this call saying that Katie's alive and wants to come home, and the caller wants $5,000. This is incredibly suspicious, and we see that through Beth later when she says that it's obviously a scam, but it also makes sense that Dawn would want to find out what's going on here. I suppose in a sprawling mystery, in a situation that everyone might be a suspect, it's natural that some parts of the story feel less essential than others based on where your head's at. Dawn's situation didn't have me on the edge of my seat, but we do see her struggling with the idea of maybe stealing the money from her work. Eventually, when she gets the call, she doesn't actually take any money with her. She just chops up a bunch of the missing posters, puts them in a drop bag, brings a gun along, and the plan appears to be that she'll try to overpower the person in hopes of finding out where Katie is. But in the end, it all turns out to be a hoax. It was actually Freddie that was making the call. That makes an awful situation even worse for her because obviously she's close with Beth. So she can't even tell someone who's clearly supportive of her what happened because her strung out brother did it. And we've seen that he's already making Beth's life stressful. In this episode, we also found out that he overdosed and that he's staying at her house again. I guess the one thing this does is it takes Freddie out of the running for being a suspect, although he wouldn't have been very high on my list in the first place. And I guess it just reinforces how connected everyone in this small town is and how that makes everything pretty complicated. Not so much a reveal, but more of a confirmation that Deacon Mark was let go from the last place he was at under allegations of sexual misconduct with a 14-year-old girl. Colin goes to find him, asks him about it. He's defensive as you would be either way. But it does seem like he's probably hiding something here. I mean, wouldn't you learn your lesson if you just got into that kind of situation and maybe not become friends and give your phone number out to Erin? There isn't enough here yet to say what's going on. Colin does bring up the idea that, hey, this is going to get out there. If I know about it, other people are going to find out, and that's going to go badly for him. And later in the episode, we see that Father Dan did get a call from a reporter about him. They're going to be writing an article. There's a tense discussion where Mark just says that he told him everything there was to know, and perhaps the problem is now that he doesn't believe him anymore. To her credit, after her really bad decision to try to use her power to ruin somebody's life, Mare does come clean to her family. Helen freaks out for all of us, basically, but in the end, they don't seem all that surprised that she did something like that. Also, to her credit, she does go and see the therapist. When she comes in, she does a lot of talking, almost like she's trying to control the situation. Tells her, hey, I don't want you to get let down if nothing happens because I've been through this before and I'm not expecting anything to come of it. She doesn't believe it will help, and I guess my takeaway from this was that the therapist actually seems pretty good, pretty well equipped in the situation, which means probably something will come out of it. She will have a breakthrough, because let's face it, Mare needs it. One final thing before we get into the big stuff that happened, and that was that we saw Mare looking at Erin's social media. She hasn't stopped looking into the case. She's still thinking about what happened. She watches a video of her talking about being exhausted from being a mother. And then Mare has this memory of Kevin and Carrie when they were in full-blown addiction, and this terrible episode where he's laying into his mother, Carrie's backing him up. Surprisingly, Mare is not really fighting back, which is kind of revealing in how she's dealing with him compared to how she deals with everyone else. But it's not terribly surprising. We'd learned that they were addicts. We'd learned that Kevin hated Mare. We hear him say it here. And once again, we see that Carrie was right there by his side. This doesn't absolve Mare for what she did, but it does make it a little easier to understand how she arrived at the decision to do so. And there's a similarity here to what Beth is dealing with Freddie and how difficult addiction is for families. We also see Carrie have her first overnight with Drew at her new place. She eventually has to give in and bring him back because he couldn't sleep. We see her break down and tell Mare that she knows that she set her up. We already knew that. She tells her that she's trying really hard to get her life together and asked her to just stop. After that, we see a girl we don't know riding in a van with a man that we're not supposed to be able to tell who he is. She's a prostitute. She looks like she's a teenager, maybe early 20s. And when she starts to get undressed, she notices that the man isn't doing the same, which prompts her to ask, is this your first time? And instead of answering, he reaches out and grabs her around the neck. As mentioned, we're definitely not supposed to be able to tell who he is. We can see that he's white. We can see that he has short, dark hair, which makes it almost look like it might be Deacon Mark. But later, when we see him take her into Benny's Tavern, which looks like it's not open anymore, he throws her into a locked room with a mattress on the floor. And to me, he looks kind of big, which means he doesn't really match any of the people who I thought might be possible candidates. She starts to scream, and Katie Bailey, who's also locked in there alive, tells her that no one can hear her. So now we know what happened to Katie. We don't get a great look at what's going on in there, but it does look like she's probably been there the whole time. And everything about this room screams sex slave to me. I can't think of any other good reason why this guy would lock up young girls he meets on an escort website other than he's using them for sex. Speaking of the escort website, we learn all about Sidedoor when Mare goes over to Colin's house to talk about the case. Before she gets there, we see Colin at home with his mother. It's a little strange. I mean, she seems like a piece of work, and I guess the implication is that he still lives with her. Otherwise, I don't know what she's doing there. Once they start talking the case, we learn that Missy Sager was a good student and athlete who had an accident, got on painkillers, that escalated from pills to heroin, and she wound up an escort on Sidedoor to help feed her habit. Detective Hauser, Mare's replacement, doesn't think the cases are related. Missy and Katie maybe, but not with Erin. And before we met Missy, I was starting to wonder if Katie and Erin's cases were connected. So I can see where they're coming from because Erin is just in a different situation than Katie Bailey was. However, Mare's not convinced that Erin doesn't have some secrets. She says she knows teenage girls are sneaky. So the fact that they haven't been turning up any evidence that she turned to prostitution isn't really sealing the deal because she says with a father like Kenny that there's no way that she would have pictures like that on her own computer. That leads them to go to talk to Jess, who, for all intents and purposes, seems to be helpful and cooperative. She explains that Erin lied about Dylan being the father because she liked Dylan's parents, and that she wanted DJ to have something like that in his life. After some pressing, they find out that Erin did create a Sidedoor account at Jess's place, but even so, she feels confident that she never actually met someone, like she could never go through with it. After they go downstairs, but before they leave, Mare goes back upstairs to ask Jess about Erin's journals. To me, this seems like she's trying to keep some of the details to herself, and I'm not really sure where that's headed, but she does lie about why she went back upstairs. And of course, later in the episode, when we see her go looking, she doesn't tell the police that she's going there or Colin anything about this clue. Jess did seem to be cooperative, but I thought she looked a little suspicious when she asked about the journals. I'm not sure that that was the intention, but we do see her watch them leave through her window with a look on her face that says that she didn't tell them everything. Another spot where a look on a character's face hinted that there was something more important going on was when we saw Lori and John at home watching the news. When their son came in and asked what they were saying, the camera lingered on him in a way that you couldn't miss. I have no idea what that's about, but he's a suspect for having a secret at least after that. A couple other things worth mentioning. Helen hiding her ice cream in the frozen veggies bag was pretty hilarious. For the most part, all the family stuff is still working and funny, and it's a good way to lighten things up. The Siobhan girlfriend stuff kind of lands even below the Dawn story for me. I imagine there's going to be a payoff to it, and both stories are fine on their own, but I do find myself having less interest in comparison to everything else that's going on. Personally, I never thought Siobhan and Becca were involved in Erin's killing, but there were some people who had her as their top suspect. I think the thing with Becca in this episode kind of shuts the door on that, and the new girlfriend seems to be there to help her get a different perspective on her family situation. The necklace that Mare found inside the dresser in Erin's room is really curious. The date says 5/29/17. DJ's only a year old, so that's probably not supposed to be his birthday. On the other hand, Drew and Kenzie are both about 4 years old, but why would she have a necklace with one of their birthdays on it? It could have something to do with her mother since she's not around anymore. Maybe it's the day that she passed away or something like that. But I'm going to have to think about this more and come back to it in the next video. None of the answers I'm coming up with at this point are really making sense. Finally, Colin made his move. He asked Mare out on the same night where Richard had already asked her to go out for his birthday. Turns out that Lady Hawk finds herself pretty popular with this sudden influx of new men in town. This is not the development I was hoping for, but it is kind of fun to watch. He is a detective like her dad. He's got that going for him. And while Richard has been pretty nice overall in the last couple of episodes, he probably lost some key points at that book party he invited her to. Although, do you really hire an actor like Guy Pearce just to have him come to town to get tossed aside? There's definitely something going on with the character. And at least from what she said to Helen, it looks like it's a toss-up at this point. She doesn't know which one she's feeling more. Overall, not my favorite episode of the run, but still a good episode of TV. Some of the storylines feel less essential, time will tell on that, but the twists and reveals were all pretty exciting. There are 7 episodes total, so we're officially past the halfway point. The pace doesn't seem to be letting up, that's a good sign. We're getting a steady stream of reveals that help balance out all the added mysteries that pop up, and now we just have to wait to see how it plays out. These lingering camera shots that exist to draw suspicion on characters, we saw this with Billy and Faye in the early episodes, they're probably not all leading somewhere, but I do feel like it's time for some of them to start paying off. It's a useful technique, but you can't just keep pulling it out if it never leads anywhere. Not much Frank at all in this episode except that we found out he wasn't the father, and the show didn't really back off in the effort to make Deacon Mark look shady, even though it still doesn't feel likely that he's the actual killer. For what it's worth, I think the guy holding Katie and Missy is a new character we haven't met yet. There's a chance that we could get some insight into who he is through the Sidedoor website. Mare did tell Colin to contact its owners. I said at the beginning that we might not understand why this connection between Katie and Erin is important. This guy seems to hold the girls he finds on the website hostage in his sex dungeon. That wouldn't implicate him in what happened to Erin at all. In fact, it makes it feel unlikely that he had anything to do with what happened to her. I'm left thinking that whether she met someone on the site or not, its existence shows that there's definitely a market for young women to make money through hooking up with older men in this town. It's popular enough that her, as a regular high school girl for all intents and purposes, knew about it, and that her friend was willing to help her set up an account. To me, that makes me wonder about all the adult men that we've met in the show. Pretty much any of them could have been using the website. She did use a fake name, but anyone that knew her would recognize her if they went on there. And come on, the whole premise of this show is that everyone knows everyone else. I think that's a good place to leave things. Let's pick up the conversation in the comments. Tell me your theories and what's on your mind after the episode. In the next few days, I'll follow this up. I'll put out another video talking about the trailer. There's a lot going on in that. Plus, I'll get into my theories along with some of the other interesting ones that are out there. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.